हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार, हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार, बेहिसाब लुटा दे प्यार, बेहिसाब लुटा दे प्यार। हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार, हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार, बेहिसाब लुटा दे प्यार, बेहिसाब लुटा दे प्यार। हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार, हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार। प्रेम का सौदा न कर, दिल से दिल दरिया तू बन, प्रेम का सौदा न कर, दिल से दिल दरिया तू बन। दिव्य प्रेम के प्रकाश को, दिव्य प्रेम के प्रकाश को, दिव्य प्रेम के प्रकाश को बना अस्तित्व का आधार, बना अस्तित्व का आधार। हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार, हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार, बेहिसाब लुटा दे प्यार, बेहिसाब लुटा दे प्यार। हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार, हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार, हृदय मेरे तू बन उदार।
Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. Special welcome to Dr. Bhaswati Bhattacharya, who has joined us for today's session. This devotional song that you just heard in the melodious voice of Me Too is on generosity. One of the major products of walking the spiritual path. So the spiritual path is about not just knowing, but a greater realization of the oneness that binds all of us. And once that oneness is felt more and more, the barrier that separates us from the rest is weakens and eventually disappears. It becomes only a matter of course that one also starts sharing and becomes more generous, because it's very easy to find people around who need what you can give, and you give off that generously. And this giving is without any calculations. As he said, generosity, that behisab luta de pyar. So there's no hisab in that. The hisab is a characteristic of the intellect. This sense of oneness is at the level of the soul, which, like the vital, also is not rational. It is supra-rational. It's only at the level of rationality, which is somewhere between the ordinary vital and the soul or the supra-rational, that we go through that intermediate stage of rationality, which has a tendency to calculate. That calculation applies neither to the vital nor to the psychic or the spiritual. So with that little introduction, let me now introduce today's speaker, Dr. Bhaswati Bhattacharya. She is one of those rare physicians who has straddled very successfully and effectively both the world of modern medicine, commonly called allopathy, and the oldest system of medicine, perhaps in the world, which originated in India, and that is Ayurveda. Uh, she is also blessed with an extremely good intellect. So with a formal education in some of the best institutions in the world, in both modern medicine and Ayurveda, she has become a perfect synthesis of these two systems. And she's not just a theoretician, she puts it into practice. She still sees patients and she applies this knowledge. But then apart from that, she's also an academician, and therefore she has teaching positions, and she has an excellent website of her own, Dinacharya, where she comes up with courses which uh, sort of can lead a person to in-depth knowledge in Ayurveda from a person who has a broad background in modern science as well as ancient wisdom. I've heard her several times, and listening to her every time has been a pleasure. She's very eloquent and confident, confidence that comes from in-depth knowledge of the subject that she is speaking upon. So without any further formalities, over to you, Dr. Bhaswati Bhattacharya.
Thank you, Dr. Bijlani. Thank you very much, and welcome to all of you on this Tuesday morning in India. It's still Monday night here in New York, and we are going to speak today in this course about the position of Ayurveda alongside modern medicine. I know that the majority of this course, you are going to spend the first half really talking about lifestyle medicine, as it's called in America, or preventive medicine, or whatever words you want to use, but the non-pharmaceutical parts of medicine. So you'll be talking about your lifestyle in terms of your daily routine, which in Sanskrit is called dinacharya, the seasonal changes that you make, exercise, food, meditation, yoga, and various interventions that, as I said, are non-pharmaceutic, non-pill-based. And then you're going to move into the disease states. So in the syllabus, you'll see there are many disease states from heart disease and diabetes and various chronic diseases to some more urgent conditions. And hopefully you'll come away from this course with a better understanding about how to navigate your own health. I'm sorry, I'm going to yawn because I'm usually in bed by now, and I can't apologize to my body for what it naturally needs to do, which is yawn. So we in India actually have an unusual country which has an advantage that it hasn't yet realized, and that is that it has 8 legal medical systems. So in many parts of the world, the citizens are struggling to be allowed to practice what they believe. So if they would like to use acupuncture, if they would like to use aromatherapy, if they have cancer and they would rather not use chemotherapy, but use another option, or if they prefer manual therapy such as chiropractic or osteopathy, or they want to get a medical massage. In many countries of Europe and the West, it's dominated by a patriarchal MD or MBBS physician who knows modern allopathy, who says, you have to do it the way that I say. It's very paternalistic. And indeed, in the upper classes of India, still in the big cities, it is that way as well. I grew up in Kolkata for some of my childhood, and I've lived in many parts of India. And whenever I'm in Bombay and Delhi, it always amazes me how people absolutely don't know about the 8 medical systems. They only know their favorite gastroenterologist, their favorite rheumatologist, their favorite neurologist, their favorite surgeon, and they think that's the diversity of medicine. Meanwhile, if you live in Benares, which is where I've chosen my main home, primarily, I will say, because there are cows and access to raw milk. That was my very big criterion for choosing Benares. And I will explain more about why. But it has to do with the fact that I really don't want allopathic medicine to be the paternalistic bully that I found that it was. This comes from many stories that I can tell you in modern medicine as a person that started out as a lab bench scientist. And I've gone to some of the best schools where, you know, I started at Princeton University, where there was a lot of wealth, and they didn't have a medical school, but nearby was the University of Pennsylvania. So I transferred there and went immediately to work in a lab. And by my third year of undergraduate, I was working on my PhD in pharmacology and neuroscience. And we learned that the best thing you could have is modern medicine. But I'm Indian. So when things would happen, like I'd catch a cold or I'd have a stomach flu or something, my mother would give me remedies. And those remedies, my father in the background said, oh, tell her to take antibiotics. But my mom would say, no, use this remedy, use this. Put some ajwain, put it in a tawa, put some lemon juice, put some black salt, what we call kala namak, and fry it and have half a teaspoon, chew on it and see, that will raise the fire in your gut and that will kill the bacteria. Try that first before antibiotics, because the antibiotics are going to hurt your belly. They're going to hurt your fire. They're going to hurt your ojas. So I came growing up with both the traditional Indian Ayurvedic wisdom and, you know, the modern medical thing that is the status symbol. And, you know, Bengalis are very interested, not in Mercedes or big houses, but in the status symbol of education. So if you can say that you went to, you know, Calcutta University or Delhi University or IIT, these are very prestigious. So using modern medicine was considered to be really advanced. And it meant you had money to be able to afford it. But really what I was doing was both, because I was listening to my mom. And when things got to a certain stage, or I couldn't follow this, or I couldn't have access to this, I would do the other. Those of us who have had access to both, do both. And that is the patient's side of things. That is how most patients have been for the last 100 years while allopathic medicine has been there. And they look for what works. They don't care whether it has a brand name on it. They want to know what works. And if it doesn't have side effects, if it doesn't have other problems, that's even better. So in these 8 medical systems, I've described Ayurveda because I'm Bengali. If you're Tibetan, you'll use Soaripa. If you're Tamilian, you might use Siddha. If you are a member of the Muslim community that's very connected to Persia, you might use Unani. If you happen to be from the Bihar School of Yoga or from Pondicherry and used yoga not as just a prevention, but as yoga therapy, meaning there were postures and kriyas, there were pranayam, and there were mantras, there were what we would call yoga chikitsa, which was actually a medical intervention using yoga. And I do have friends who use yoga for medical interventions, and I am always so grateful that yoga, I don't like the word yoga therapy because now it's become like a naturopathic, allopathic thing, but true yoga therapy where you use marma points and where you use the kriyas of yoga are so effective in resolving diseases that modern medicine cannot get to. And I've helped many people resolve, especially diseases that are idiopathic or that involve pain or that involve the immune system. And we've used yoga. I have a fantastic yoga teacher, and she has been doing yoga therapy for 30 years. And she has that special power to understand things that are beyond the visible. So with all of these medical systems in India, we're so lucky. And the reason I say it's funny is because most people do not have working awareness of this. It's all right in front, but somehow they do not have that desire to learn, or maybe it works for them, or the status is where it's at, and so they never try to reform it. For many of us, though, we found that we needed to. I think I first became a little skeptical when I was at Columbia University in a lab doing very good work. We had a bunch of Nobel Prize winners on our, in our area around. the building. And there was a lot of work on pharmaceutics and neurological pharmaceutics going on. And there was a professor that asked me to go with him for the summer as a research assistant to Tibet, which, of course, if you have a choice between staying in a lab and cutting up animals versus going to the mountains, the Himalayan mountains, and enjoying, helping a professor. So I went, and I was at the Mensekang in Lhasa. I lived in Lhasa in Tibet and China for 6 months. And I kept wondering, why would these people use these little brown pills that aren't standardized or a little lopsided, and they're not clean and fresh and standardized like pharmaceutical pills? But I saw clinically that they worked. And as my time passed, that initial thought that, why would they use these? Maybe they don't have access to good modern medicine, turned into, wow, they don't need modern medicine. They're using their bhasmas and their golis, and these are working even better. And so I came back to Columbia University, one of the meccas of neuroscience, and I said, well, why don't we pay attention to some of these plant medicines and these other ways of looking at subtle energies and other ways of solving medical problems? Why don't we mix both of them together and have this available to also try these natural therapies? And they scoffed at me. They felt that it was impractical to think about such backwards, primitive, these very derogatory words around the traditional ancient medicines. And they said that science evolves and we should evolve with it. Meanwhile, I was in the modern world, right? I mean, doing a PhD in biomedical sciences, modern medical sciences. So it wasn't really an option to talk back to them. I, after that, did a public health training because I got accepted into a program that was looking at human rights because of my time in Tibet and what I had witnessed between the Chinese and the Tibetans, and which should be of concern to most Indians, actually. But I watched it and I decided that I wanted to do a course on human rights. So I went and completed a Master of Public Health from Harvard, and I really saw public health as a place where we could see many different ways of looking at disease. And I thought they would be open-minded. And so here's an article actually that is titled, let's see, I think it's titled something like One Nation, One Health System. So it's about integrative policy. And certainly you can take a look at this article. And this is by one of the technical officers of EMAMI, Dr. C.K. Katiyar, who's actually a schoolmate of mine. And in this diagram that I was showing you is this 4-part. This is where allopathy is, disease management. There's a little bit of disease prevention, they call that vaccines, or a little of lifestyle medicine. But they don't really teach us in medical school a lot about health maintenance and health protection. When we learn physiology, we learn it because it should teach us what it comes back to from pathophysiology. The pathophysiology is what's emphasized. The physiology is just kind of something that might be there. But this idea of spending effort, spending money, spending doctors' hours teaching people about protecting their health and maintaining their health is just not emphasized very much. And so we find that these kind of systems that I'm talking about, these legal medical systems, are really put to the side and they're not really trusted. As I started studying Ayurveda more formally, which was due to quite a few reasons, but the main reason was that I was serendipitously invited to do a film for National Geographic on Ayurveda. And because I look Indian, they figured all Indians know Ayurveda. So they asked me, and in my arrogance of being a modern physician, I thought, well, I can learn anything very quickly. I'll just read a book this weekend and know what it is. And I didn't realize so many things about Ayurveda. And when I did the film, it really made me think more deeply about what is health? How do people heal? Do they have the right to use the kind of medicine that they want? Is it a public health prerogative that a public health official should force people? Like, right now, actually we're in January, so maybe 2 months from now, 3 years ago, there were people coming in suits and taking people from the house by force into quarantine chambers. If you are in a part of the country where you remember that, that was by force, and people were scared of the coronavirus, and they were doing dire things as though the plague had come. And since India never saw the plague, right, we know that it decimated Europe, and we know there were encephalitis cases that took care of Japan and China. But in India, we didn't have any of these large, widespread diseases that are called Janapada Dvamsa in Sanskrit. So we were at a loss in some ways, and a lot of people criticized the policy of non-contact and thought that the powers, the authorities were in the wrong for having such a policy. If you watch the few Ayurvedic people, which are only maybe a few million people out of 1.3 billion in India, they were doing the things that chapter, Janapada Dvamsa, which is Charaka Samhita's chapter in Vimanastan, number 3. It's a chapter that describes public health in general terms. And what it said is that whenever there's an epidemic, you as an individual should check the air around you, the water around you, the land around you, and the sense of time. And time can mean the season, it can mean how long you spend at things, but there are certain ancient rituals or practices that have been done, and you should see whether or not you're doing those well. So cleaning up, the idea of saucha, which is also in yoga, but doing that, and cleaning around you, cleaning the land around you, your home around you, making sure that garbage cans are closed and that there's not trash everywhere, and that the trees and the areas around the trees are cleaned, making sure there's water for the birds or for animals that come by. And of course, this was in spring and then summer in India. So by March and April, birds were waiting for water, and so were the stray dogs. And all of the environment around you, if you take care of it, then the environment will come back into balance. Man did not learn this lesson very well, which is why 3 years later, there's still a lot of things happening, whether it's called RSV or another variation or whatever it is. This kind of imbalance and not understanding that staying healthy and intervening on disease need to both be emphasized at the same time in order to have a health system. This was not very well taught. And certainly we didn't learn our lesson very well. And, it's very possible we'll have another wave in the future, because those who did learned how to change their health around. Those who didn't are going to suffer, actually. So Ayurveda has been through many cycles of this. Allopathic medicine is only, let's say, 120 or 150 years old. It still thinks everything is new, just like a 20-year-old adult who thinks that they know lots of things. I meet them every day out on the street. They hate those of us who are old, who have gray hair, because they think we don't know anything, and they think they know everything, just like modern medicine thinks it knows everything. Ayurveda, conservatively 5,000 years, more probably 15,000 years of practice, where generation to generation to generation, people have handed down the knowledge to their children, to their students. Ayurveda has said that you must look at health in 2 ways. One is for wellness, which is in the shloka. This is again from Charaka Samhita, but in the Sutrastan, not the Vimanastan. The Sutrastan, which is the first section, chapter 30, it says, Swastasya swastya rakshanam. Keep the healthy person healthy. Aturasya vikara prasamanam cha. And if the person is unhealthy or has a disorder, vikara means an imbalance, then you treat them comprehensively. That means you don't give them a medicine that's going to create a second disease. There shouldn't be side effects from that medicine, because then it's not a medicine. A medicine is something that intervenes and provides treatment of a disorder to bring that back to balance. And what is that balance? The definition is provided in another book of another older, some argue about the time period, but Sushruta Samhita. And he had said, sama dosha, when there's all your doshas, so Ayurveda talks about doshas, vata, pitta, kapha. Sama Agnishcha, when the balance of the doshas, when the balance of the Agni. So Agni means that which consumes. So it's all the enzymes, all the hormones, all the things in the body that transform from one thing to another, consume things that need to not be there and transform them into another form of matter or from matter to energy. Sama dhatu, when there's balance in the dhatus, in the tissues of the body. Sama mala. So all the wastes of the body that are produced are properly kept in the body for as long as it's needed and then sent out of the body. So by the time we are young children, we learn how to hold the feces in the body and not let it go whenever it's ready, right? Like a 1-year-old baby does. So that idea of holding the mala in the body and then periodically letting it out, but also not holding it in forever and being constipated, but absolutely letting out, usually once a day. Malakriya. So the kriya, the actions of making the mala properly on the cellular level, the organ level, and sending it out. To have a happy, healthy soul, atma, senses, indriya, and mind, manaha. This is the definition of swasthya, which is health, which is that state of balance. So Ayurveda talks about the state of balance and says, yes, it's balancing. The kind of scam right now going on is that people in modern medicine that accept Ayurveda a little bit say, well, it's good for prevention. It's very good for prevention. For all the things we can't do, it's very good. What they don't realize is that second part, which was the aturasya vikara, right? The part that says you can intervene. And as a physician, what I was fascinated with was how Ayurveda had cures for diseases that were impossible to treat in modern medicine. And so when I started learning these and finished that film that I mentioned earlier, I came back to the US and I was determined I was going to learn some of these things and put them to practice. And so at that time, what was going on was the use of hormone replacement therapy for menopause. And at that time of my career, I was an attending physician at New York Presbyterian Hospital, and one of their community hospitals had put me on staff in OB-GYN, modern internal medicine, and modern family medicine. So I had 3 department appointments. And the women's health issue of hormone replacement therapy was very, very big. And I had learned about an herb called Shatavari. So Shat means 100, Avri means lovers or husbands. So Shatavari is a woman who has the strength to handle 100 husbands. And it's a root that is used for female health. It is used in different ways, in different combinations. And there was one called Pushyanuga Churna, which was very good for excess bleeding. And there were several formulas that were handmade for menopause. And so I started using some of these formulas, and I found that they gave women menopausal relief when the hormone replacement therapy gave higher risk and incidence of cancers. And so that became something in my mind that was interventional. It was not preventive. I mean, you could say preventing hot flashes, but it was really interventive on the condition, the very severe condition of menopausal hot flashes and menopausal distress. Then I met patients that had diabetes, and I was in India for that film, and there had been a patient who used a process called Pancha Karma. So Pancha means 5, Karma are actions, and it's a cleansing action series. So there's a preliminary stage where you have to get the patient ready. And the scam today is that the people that are doing Panchakarma, they'll take you in without getting you ready because it takes a while and they don't make a lot of money on it. But it's basically getting you to stop doing the things that are bad for you that the modern medical system hasn't stopped, and showing you how to stop. Stopping excess drinking, stopping smoking, stopping eating foods that are not good for you, making sure you get enough exercise, but not too much, moving away from your obsessive compulsive disorders, being clean, learning how to bathe by taking oil on your body before you bathe, and not using so much of artificial products on your skin, like hand lotions or sanitizers, makeup, hair dye, all these things that are cosmetic but are not good for you. That's all part of Purva Karma. And then they take you through a period of time where they clean out your body. And that Shodhana actually cleans out excess stuff that has accumulated. And that undigested residue is called ama, or toxin. Modern medicine has no process like this. But as they do it, they find that not only do, in this case, I was talking about diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, certain cancers, orthopedic concerns, heart disease for sure, many gastrointestinal issues, a lot of what I knew as a doctor as diseases started resolving during this Panchakarma. And then toward the end of it, as the toxins had been kind of pulled together, just like when you're cleaning a room and you use a broom to sweep all the dirt into one area, Panchakarma are the 5 practices that will, depending on your body type, will pull out those things from your body. So if you have too much Vata, it's Basti. If you have too much Pitta, it's Virechana. So like this, there are 5. And then after they've pulled that dirt out, you need to set the room, right? After you cleaned it. So reset where the sofa or the bed was, or reset the chairs. That resetting is called Paschat Karma, after karma. And it is reestablishing your daily routine, your food habits, your exercise, slowly getting you to do your Hatha yoga. You've already been doing your breath work, but your Hatha yoga, re-entering relationships, doing the mental work that's needed to give you the mental strength. And this entire process that I watched was nothing but interventional. It was not a preventive thing. It was absolutely interventional. And I watched diabetic people go through 4 to 6 weeks of Panchakarma and have their blood sugars come down, their hemoglobin A1C come down. And as a modern doctor at that time, I was pretty shocked. I could not believe that this was possible. So when I got back to the US after the film, I decided I am going to start using some of this. So I started using some of the herbal formulations for diabetes. So for, since the late 90s, I've been doing what is now called integrative medicine. It's had first it was called holistic medicine, then alternative medicine, then alternate medicine, then complementary medicine, then integrative medicine. But what I was doing is the best that would help the patient reestablish what we could say is balance or reestablish health. And as I've done this over the years, it's never occurred to me that I should label myself in a particular way. What I was doing is asking the question, how do you heal? And how can I help you? Using things that man who has come before us has used. And in India, since it's got one of the most ancient wisdom traditions, it is probably the most ancient. It's just not the most well preserved. So in the Chinese texts, they even say that we got this knowledge from the brown men south of the Himalayas, which is referring to the Indians. And in the Yellow Emperor's book of internal medicine, they refer to what is Ayurveda. It's also known that there were scholars that came across from East Asia, which is China, down into the Bharatiya areas, which went from Afghanistan all across the subcontinent down to Indonesia and over to Cambodia. That entire area was Bharat, Akhand Bharat. And they came over to learn, what are these herbs you're using? What are these practices? What are these marma points? Marma points are the predecessor of what became acupuncture. What are these massage techniques that you're using? And why are you using oil to make this happen? Oh, and what does that do to that disease state? So as they learned this and took it back to China or Tibet, or Alexander took it back to Greece, and then incidentally Hippocrates found it, and that whole history has been rewritten by Westerners to say that Greece brought medicine to India and called it Ayurveda. We have enough documentation in archaeology now that shows that the documents were around 10, 15,000 years ago. Recently, a couple of years ago in Sri Sailam in eastern Karnataka, they found mortar and pestle to make medicines that are 30,000 years old by carbon dating. So, they weren't using those for anything else. They were using them for medicines. They're mortar and pestle used for actually mercurial preparations. And they found golis, they found medicines. We ignore those data because it's convenient to ignore it. But the fact is that the history supports that. And as we move into the now current time, many people are trying to resolve it. And so the government has come up, most of you know, about 5 years ago, they came up with a bill called the National, it's NCISM, the National, it's the Commission for Indian Systems of Medicine. And what they're saying is that by 2030, which is now 7 years from now, we are going to have an integrated medical system where you're going to be able to somehow get whatever kind. So it's not either or, it'll be both, but not just both, it'll be 8 systems. So, Asht, not both. That's what they're saying. So, of course, I'm watching all this. I did a mid-career PhD from BHU in Benares just a few years ago. I passed out 5 years ago. So I've been on the scene, kind of watching what's happening. And I go back and forth between India and the US. The US is evolving. They are learning that they really need to offer other medical options, and not just health options, but medical options. And so the language is gradually changing, mainly because patients have tried medicines and they're sick and tired of the side effects. And they want to learn how to use some of these things that you all are learning, which include yoga and nasya and meditation and poses and postures that actually work on the relationship of the muscle and fascia with the inner organs and with the mind and with the breath, hatha yoga. They want those options. And in India, people are starting to learn about these other medical types as well. In America, it's because the cost is prohibitive for a lot of the medical options. And in India, sometimes it's because some of them are very, bhakt, right? Jai Hind, Jai India. So we need to learn Indian things. But for many, they are learning it because they're fed up with the side effects of modern medicine. And I will say, having traveled at least 25 cities in the last 6 months in India, and not in VIP, cars and with Z level security and staying at the Taj, but living in middle class, running around on trains and buses and being around the people, I can see that people are fed up with doctors who are private doctors, especially, charging because they can, demanding diagnostics because they can, over-diagnosing diseases that aren't really perfectly diagnosed, we'll put it that way. And so patients run around and get a second opinion because they just want to be sure that that doctor didn't play them. And the fact is, most doctors are playing. They are trying to make profit for their own private hospitals. That's not true of all doctors, but it's true of enough that the patients are suffering. And what they are doing is now shopping around. The problem with shopping around is that when you have modern medicine and Ayurveda and yoga and Unani and Siddha and homeopathy, that's one I didn't mention before, homeopathy, naturopathy, Swarippa, they don't know which one is going to be best for them. And so they will go and take their prescription from, let's say, Dr. Bijlani gives a prescription to them. They will come over and ask Dr. Aditi, what do you think of this prescription? Now, she's his student. She's like, oh, yes, it's a good prescription. But if she doesn't know him, she might say, oh, who gave you this prescription? Oh, this is okay, but you should have had this one and this one. That's fine because they're both allopaths. But what if they're an Ayurvedic doctor? I give you a prescription for Dashmul Katutraya. I give you a prescription for Draksha, the Arishtam, and you take it to an allopathic doctor. They'll say, oh, this is just jari booty. This is garbage. Throw it away. Where is the patient left? Can the patient choose properly? And what we need today is a mass education campaign. And that is a huge problem in India because who's going to be the teacher? There are very few of us who are fluid between all these different systems and can really educate people. And sometimes it's very frustrating because we have to teach people the same things over and over again. And, they'll challenge us. So last year, I completed an entire year of teaching about food. It took us 4 quarters, which was about 50 weeks. And I went through this book, the Ashtanga Hridayam, chapter by chapter, shloka by shloka. There are 4 chapters on food. And instead of just going shloka by shloka like they do in India, I also pulled in modern medical knowledge, nutrition knowledge, food chemistry, food industry, and all of the phytochemistry and the yogic perspective, but then again, the yoga of food, which is Ayurvedic and modern medicine together. So both. And we started a site called Ayurveda. So it's Ayurveda and vegetarian, Ayurveda, AYUVE.in. And we've posted, I don't know, several dozens of articles on traditional Ayurvedic things. And so we talked about ghee, and we talked about where to get good rice, and we talked about the difference between certain panakas that you can take in the spring. And we talked about this time of year last year, til laddu, why all of you this week should, how many of you had your til laddu today? 1, 2. Okay, so this time of year, til is very good. So, if I do modern medicine and Ayurveda, one of the things I can do is talk to you about why this time of year, the qualities that are in your body are this way, and why logically, according to Ayurveda, you should use these foods to counter these qualities. Modern medicine doesn't have anything like this at all. They just say eat carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and that's taken from the dietetics, the dietitians, and the macronutrient, micronutrient conversation. They don't say what food you should have for what season. For them, have what you want, right? Unless you have a renal diet, so don't eat so much protein, or you're a diabetic, so don't eat so much sugar. They just don't know. So I was very curious as a physician. So I started reading, and I went down a few rabbit holes, and like Alice in Wonderland. So I found the wonder of Ayurvedic approaches to foods. So back to the til laddu. If this season is cold, dry, rough, light, and mobile, these 5 adjectives describe Vata. And I did teach about this, I think was it YES.02 or YES.03? I think it was 02 that I taught about this. And those lectures are available, you can see them. As you learn about Vata, and you learn that this season, just up until 2 days ago, was Vata season. It was cold, dry, light, mobile, rough. So to counter that, you need things that are warm, moist, soft, right? Cold, dry, rough. Mobile is moving, so you want still, and light, so you want heavy. And the solution for all of these is to eat a til laddu. The reason is that til is it's sesame, right? The English pronunciation in America is sesame, or sesame, as some people say, or gingerly, or in Sanskrit, it's til. So the til is a seed, it's a plant that has a seed that has an immense oil in it that's called the king of oils. Because this oil actually happens to go into the human body and scrape away all of the stuff that has accumulated. So on our body, on the outside of our body during the Vata season, we should be giving ourselves massage with that oil, because it counters, we should warm it up slightly and put it on, so it counters that cold, dry, light, mobile, rough of the Vata season. So at the end of the Vata season, we want to warm up, but we also want to see what's coming next. So as Makar Sankranti happens, the sun, which is in the most south position, begins, in our eyes, sitting on Earth, begins to move north. And as it does, the coldness changes slightly to warmth and things start to melt. And so the water which has been at the coldest level becomes more hot in your body, and the moisture content changes from cold to, you could say, thawing out. And so your kapha is lubrication and stability, but it's also phlegmy. And so til will clean out in between your channels. So if you have a lot of phlegm in there, it'll just go in and it will clean out the phlegm along the sides of your channels. So it's very, very good for cleaning out the body. We use it as mouth gargling, which is called gandusha, what we say kulkuchi in Bengali. And we spit that out. We also put it on our body for a massage. We use it for hair oil, and we put it in our hair and go and sit in the sun. How many of you guys do these rituals in the winter? How many of you have grandparents that do these rituals? Okay, a few more. So this was Ayurveda, you can say preventing, but actually intervening on things. That til is kept together. It's oily, but it's kept together using sugar cane, which is called ikshu in Sanskrit and ak in common colloquial North Indian languages. And that is squeezed out, and from it comes this juice, which is called sugar cane juice, which, how many of you have tried it? It's like one of the most delicious things, right? Very, very delicious. So they take it, and in Punjab and in many parts of North India, they will slow cook it. They will not use metals and all kinds of quick drying mechanisms. They'll slow cook it. And as it slow cooks and it caramelizes and it doesn't get burned, the water slowly evaporates out and you're left with this molasses, which then becomes a block, which is called jaggery or gur. And that is among the most valuable sugar around. So since I did my PhD in diabetes, I could spend the next 2 hours talking about this. But the brief on it is that there's a lot of data in the chemical modern medical literature that also backs this up. If you take sugarcane juice and you don't get rid of any of the minerals and you don't even heat it, you just have it raw, they have shown that it actually lowers blood sugar and that it helps cure liver diseases. My former boyfriend actually had jaundice, and he was a VIP, and he had all his medical treatment at best hospitals, best doctors, and they couldn't get rid of it. And his grandmother called him and said, "Come home." And she made him eat ak. And he said, "Can you squeeze it for me?" She said, "No, you need to chew on it." And so he bit down on it and he sucked out the juice. And within 2 days, his jaundice was gone. So I thought this was kind of unusual. So I started looking up papers, modern scientific, real science papers, right? Because we can't believe any of this jari booty stuff. So I started looking this up, and it turns out that it's in the literature that if you take sugarcane juice and you eat it raw, and you take it and you put it on assays of cell cultures, and you look at markers of animals and whether or not their sugar will come down, it actually does lower blood sugar. So when you take it and you caramelize, you make it into jaggery, it also is full of nutrients and is very good for you. And since you can't find sugarcane juice everywhere, only in the rural areas, they will make the til laddus with that sugarcane juice. Everyone else will use the gur this time of year. So that til laddu is super good for your health. So I have my bottle over there. And so I am having my til laddus this time of year. Now, if you have that sugarcane juice, you'll find that in about 2 more months, March, April, that sugarcane juice, 1 glass or 1 10-inch ak, like what shall we call it, like a rod cylinder of sugarcane, if you can chew on it, it will make your teeth stronger, and it will also bring down your blood sugar. But it has to be raw. It can't be pressed by a metal juice squeezer, because your saliva actually alters the pectins that are in the channels that hold the juice and convert it into a sugar that's actually good for your body. What we do in the modern day is we use this recipe of making white sugar, because white was, the European way of saying something is better. And so we have what's called refined white sugar, and that has become poisonous. Just as we can take poisons and deactivate them and make them unpoisonous, we can take medicines and change them around through refined processing and make them poisonous. And that is what we have done with white sugar. And that is why there's so much diabetes out there compared to before. So I've tested this out with my patients. And this is another way that I have modern medicine and Ayurveda. And I use the science from this side to validate people's inquisitiveness. But I use the techniques from this side of Ayurveda because they've worked. And I can tell you 100 stories of where I've used both, not just the science and the theory, but also in patients who have, like you can name any disease, and there are ways that I have worked with treating it and enjoyed going back to India and finding Vaidyas who know how to treat it and say, okay, how would you work with pancreatitis or with coronary artery disease or whatever my patients, come to me with. And it's fascinating to watch that it actually does work. So people will ask me, well, does that mean you don't use modern medicine? Sometimes the patient really wants to use modern medicine. And so I really have learned over time that it's not up to me to decide whether to use both. It's up to the patient. And I will say that when patients come to me and say, prove to me that Ayurveda works, prove it to me, I'll simply say, not everyone deserves Ayurveda. Please go use your allopathic medicine, because you are challenging Ayurveda. You don't believe in it. And frankly, Ayurvedic medicines take a lot of time to prepare. So if you don't believe in it, why would we waste Mother Nature on you? Go and have synthetic medicine. People don't like that. So it brings them back to being more curious about Ayurveda. And they really have to want it, because I'm not going to babysit them. So if they're not really wanting to do Ayurveda and they're going to challenge every single thing, and I've seen it. I've seen it in so many difficult patients. I say have apples, and they say, well, I couldn't find apples, so I just had something else red. I had tomatoes. I hope that's okay. Like, they don't get it. They use their own logic of red versus red. I'll say in the morning, they'll say, what's the first thing I should eat, doctor? Let's make this practical. And I'll say it should be, there are 4 things that the Ayurvedic texts say that will nourish your tissue. So you should start your day breaking the fast of not having eaten, whatever time that is. It should be when you are hungry. It can be at 7 or 8 in the morning. It should be after the sun comes up. And it should be only when you're hungry. So hopefully that'll be by noon. If you aren't hungry by noon, there's something else going on, and you need to work with getting your digestive fire high and figuring out why your appetite, your ruchi hasn't come in. But let's say you want to eat somewhere between 7 and 11:30. The first thing you should have in your mouth is one of these 4 substances. I'll give you a 5th, which is some kind of water. So the water can have different components depending on what time of year it is, whether it should be hot water, cool water, whether you should have a kada, which is a like a herb infused water. So that's the 5th one. But in terms of foods, there are 4. And they will say, yeah, but can I have millets? Can I have barley? Well, what if I want to have fruit? What if I want to? And when they challenge me, I realize they're not ready for the wisdom of Ayurveda. So I say, just go ahead and do what you want to do. So there's a lot of things you shouldn't start with. One of them is nothing that it clogs the channel. Yogurt clogs the channels. So yogurt is abhishyandi. It clogs the channels of the body. Don't start with yogurt. So these 4 are pure cow milk. No, almond milk doesn't count as cow milk. No, coconut milk doesn't count as cow milk. Oat milk doesn't count as cow milk. Neither does rice milk. Cow milk is cow milk. Can I have goat's milk? No, cow milk. Second is ghee, not ghee that you make from malai, but ghee that you make from yogurt. So milk should be made to yogurt, should be churned and separated. The bottom part that separates out is called buttermilk. The top part that floats up to the top is called butter. And that butter is then heated to make ghee. That is ghee, not the desi ghee stuff that you see in the store, and not the stuff your grandmother makes from the malai that she collects from the milk. because she doesn't make that into yogurt first. So cultured ghee. The third one that nourishes the body is rice. Well, can I have barley that looks like rice? No, have rice. And the fourth one is wheat, not enriched wheat, but actual atta, and not Ashirvad atta or Patanjali atta, but actual gehu. So gehu is the wheat berry that has been mashed or pulverized. Peshwala has mashed it, and that peshka gehu becomes atta flour. And people say, well, where do I get that? I can't go to Spencer's and get that. We shouldn't be going to Spencer's. So if you make it a priority wherever you live to find those items, because they are available and they're generally not as easily available, but they are available. These are the things to eat. So when someone says, well, what in rice? You have your choice. If you're in South India, you're going to have idli, you're going to have dosa, you're going to have an uttapam, you're going to have something made from rice, which has been crushed into small pieces or flour, and then perhaps fermented overnight. And you're going to have that in the morning. You can have poha, which is flattened rice. You can have lai or murmuri, or what else do they call puffed rice? So puffed rice. You can have rice that was left over from last night that was kept in an earthen vessel, covered to the rim with, not the rim, but the rim of the amount of rice that's there. So it's covered in water with a cloth over it. And in the morning, you put that on the fire and you make it. And in Bangla, we call that bhate bhat. In Sanskrit, we call that manda. Manda is rice that has got a lot of water in it. So it's a very watery rice. You can call it rice gruel or rice porridge. These substances have been told in Ayurveda to nourish the body. They take you through the process of your mouth to your gut and cross the boundaries, the barrier between your gut and your blood, and they will nourish you. Why do you need to nourish you if you're overweight, or if you have, some kind of cholesterol disorder, or you're fat? If you're fat, it means your fire is not good in your body and you do not know how to digest. Your fire's not taking care of those residues of your body. That's why you're fat. And if you're very skinny, then you don't have fire that's able to take the food that you eat and transform it into nutrients and put it onto your body as muscle. So in both cases, both extremes, people need to increase their fire and they need to nourish their body. They need to build up their tissues, which is called dhatu poshaka, the process of putting on or making, building good tissue, good bone, good muscle, good fat, and good blood. So to do that, you need to start your day after you break your fast by cleaning your senses. So your 5 senses, that's why we brush our teeth, wash our face, and do our morning chores. And then we need to actually eat the most important thing, which is oxygen, which is why we have pranayama. And then we need to eat sunlight. So we go outside and we do a Surya Namaskar. We, walk in the sun, take the cows out to graze, or go out into the sun. They say when you wake up in the morning, you should get some of the morning actual outdoor nature. If it's summertime, you should put your feet in the earth and take in the earth energy. So all of this is called ahara. Hara means to lose, hard, right? To lose. Ahara is not to lose or to take in. So in colloquial language, we say ahara is food, but ahara is everything we take in. So you take in the oxygen, you take in the sunlight, you take in the energy of the morning air, you take in freshness, you take in the geodromic vibration of the earth under your feet. This is called earthing now. So there's MDs that have been writing articles about the scientific need for earthing, especially if you sleep with a lot of electronics around you that produce a lot of positive ions. The earthing will give you a balanced body, and it'll take away some of that electromagnetic non-ionizing radiation that you're exposed to if you're sitting in the middle of Wi-Fi all night, or a big screen TV, or you sleep with your phone, near your head here, or people sleep with it under their pillow, which I think is just a crazy thing, or in their shirt pocket, whatever. So get outside. And then the next ahara is the food. So you want to take in things that are going to build your tissues, and those 4 are it. Now, can you do this while you're taking your modern medicines? Of course you can. Of course you can. But what you will find is that if you build up these routines, which are medicinal on a subtle energy level, you will not need as much medicine. And I found this out accidentally because I wrote a book called Everyday Ayurveda, which is about dinacharya and the daily routine. And I started getting emails. And I got actually a handful of them from people that said, guess what? I started doing my daily routine. I started getting out into the sun. And by that time, we had discovered clock genes, right? So Rorschach, Holland, Young had gotten the 2017 Nobel Prize in Physiology for their study of how our morning cycles develop with these 2 genes that open up and tell us, okay, it's daytime, make these proteins from the DNA, close the DNA. Next day at the same time, open up, make the proteins, close. So these are called clock genes because they work on a clock. And so your brain's different parts work at this time of day, and your liver works at that time of day, and your thyroid works at this time of day, and your hormones of your heart, the heart does make hormones. It's an endocrine gland. So there's a clock for that. There's a clock for parts of the gut, the stomach, the intestines, the colon. All of these have clocks. And so clock genes were discovered, and they correlate absolutely with Ayurvedic dinacharya. So people were writing to me and saying, I did these routines, and guess what? My thyroid went back into balance, and I'm now off my thyroid hormone. And I thought, how is that possible? I didn't learn about that as a medical doctor. But then I started reading more and realizing that the master gland, which is the thyroid gland, is actually dependent on clock genes. And when your clock genes are not in order because you don't have a good dinacharya, you have all kinds of medical problems. And so once you get the factory in order and you do this first and this second and this third and this fourth, and not this first and this second and this third and that fourth and this fifth, as long as you get your ducks in order, your body becomes efficient, and suddenly disease states of imbalance go away. I've seen it. It's part of my practice, and it shows me that you can absolutely do it. When people get to extremes, like they have cancer or they have coronary artery blockages, yes, it's even more important that you use Ayurvedic things to go to the root cause and balance that, but don't quit these medicines, right? But keep both of them. And as this gets stronger and stronger and your body reaches forward, these will naturally need to be pulled away. So I've had people say, wow, my pressure was so low today, I had to not take my high blood pressure medicine. What do I do? I say, don't take your high blood pressure medicine today. See how it is tomorrow. Check your blood pressure. And after a week, if it's a problem, go to the doctor and have them unprescribe you. Some of them do go to the doctor, and some of them say, why am I going to pay this guy 5,000 rupees for him to tell me to stop taking the medicine that I didn't even want to take in the first place? So they just stop and they don't visit the doctor again. I always advocate that they should go and tell the doctor. They should take some time to go and tell the doctor, because if something happens, but I've had a lot of my patients who are on Wall Street who have hypertension, or these MPs sitting in India who have these stressful lives. They're busy spending everyone's taxpayer money on their own private concerns. They get high blood pressure. And so they call me and they say, oh, can you help me with my blood pressure? I went to Ames and the guy gave me these drugs. I don't want to take them. And I tell them, take them, but start taking Muktavati. Mukta is pearl. Pearl cools down the body. It brings down the blood pressure. It's not the only medicine. Different medicines for different people. But for example, they'll take Muktavati and they'll take, whatever is needed for their dosha and their lifestyle, and their blood pressure comes down. Their sugars also get under control. And when they learn how to de-stress themselves, I use something that it's not even religious. It actually has a very philosophical base. It has to do with the times of day where the earth is changing. So you're going from night to day, or you're going from the rising sun over the high noon into the setting sun, or you're going from day to night. Does anyone know what those are called? Those times of the day? Are we Indians here? I think everyone's name looks Indian. कोई नहीं जानते हैं क्या? इसका नाम क्या? ये जो रात से दिन शुरू होते हैं. Should I be talking in Hindi or is English okay? I think English is okay, right? Dono.
I
Okay.
only know about one, which is called Brahma Muhurat.
That's not actually when the night turns to day. That's actually 48 minutes. It ends 48 minutes before the day starts. So if this is sunrise, 48 minutes before that. So let's say this is 6 o'clock, then this is 5:12. Okay. This period from 4:26 to 5:12, that is Brahma Muhurta. Okay. That's the time that you should be waking up. Brahma Muhurta Uttishtet. So you get up at that time. So you wake up and then you have this period of time to get all your morning chores done, get your shoes on and get outside to meet the sun. And then this is sunrise. Okay, so that's Brahma Muhurta. The time going from night to day and from day to night is called Sandhya. So if you've heard of Sandhya Puja, how many of you guys do Sandhya Puja? Oh my God, so you knew it already. So Sandhya Puja is that Sandhi. Sandhi is the joint between, in this case, night and day, in this case, day and night, and in this case, high noon, which is the Sandhya of the rising sun turning into the setting sun. And 3 times a day, devout Brahmins actually do a 5-minute Shanti time where they put on a candle and they get completely quiet and they withdraw from the world. And people think that's just sanskar. The reason is that when you move from night to day in that longitude from the North Pole to the South Pole, all the trees that have been sleeping wake up to the eastern sun and they turn like this and they say, it's time to photosynthesize. And there's this mass movement, just like when you see a lot of people coming out of the metro at exactly 8:55 in the morning to run into their offices, right? There's this mass movement of all the plants and trees and shrubs from the North Pole down through that time period of sunrise, the Sandhya, right? All the way down to the South Pole. And then they turn toward the south and they kind of turn just a little bit toward the setting sun, but they really turn a lot when it goes to the western and they say, now we're going to stop photosynthesizing because the sun is going down, and they're going to quiet down and they're going to turn their functions. And when you think about the billions of trees that are chemical factories making the photosynthetic molecules, turning from this and down, there's a mass movement, just like those factory workers going back out of, DLF city and on to the metro and leaving. You see this mass exodus of movement. There's a huge movement that's a vata, right? It's like a huge current, a wave. So that wave is vata. And so people are taught during that Sandhya time to just be still, because the vata that's all around you will not penetrate your body. If you spend the time in breath work, good pranayam, you can use it as a time to do your anulom vilom, or you can do whatever breath work you feel is needed. You can do some yoga if that's a good time for you. But it is said that at this time, you should not eat, you should not read, you should not run, you should not be doing all kinds of, activities. How many of you have heard that from your grandmother or your mother? Yeah, some of you know this. And the reason is because you don't want all that current of movement, that chaotic vata to enter your system. So that is why they say that at that time you should sit still. And when I learned that there is actually an Ayurvedic reason behind these kind of rituals, it really heartened me, because I grew up with two parents who are Brahmin, who both had their rituals from their own lineages, and then grew up, in our house doing puja, and our puja ghar was a central part of our life. Even when, well, certainly when we were in Kolkata, but even when we were in America, my mother said, I don't need anyone's permission to do this, but I do need them not to watch. I need their drishti not upon me, because I don't want their judgment. And so we very quietly watched what they did, but no one gave us explanations. And certainly in the modern medical world, I'm always so disappointed. They say Brahman is as Brahman does. So I don't care what your last name is. You could be as STSC or as Brahmin, general category, OBC cat, whatever they have in India. But if you don't learn these things, if you don't have this wisdom, then you're not really, a Brahmin. And if you do have it and you practice it, it's amazing. You have combined the best of healing. And when you combine the best of healing, that's when you get this, what's called both, right? The title of this talk was Ayurveda and modern medicine, either or both. And so I think one of the most gratifying things in my life is to know that I have the understanding from a scientific point of view, or a logical, what we call pramana or yukti, but I also know the rituals, and we call them rituals in modern medicine, but in Ayurveda, they are the way to go, the dinacharya, the ritucharya, the ahara sanskars. So I've just talked nonstop for an hour, and I see that there's a couple of people that have enjoyed it, but I haven't seen any questions. So I invite you to unmute yourselves and ask any questions that you might have. Sakshi, you have your hand up.
Yes.
Hello.
I really like the session, and just a little bit about myself. I have also transitioned from MBBS to yoga, and I'm a yoga teacher myself, and I'm also a psychologist, and I'm practicing these integrative practices for my own self, obviously, but also for my students. So I do relate on certain level with you on certain things. Although my question here is, with today's advent and today's current trend in the US, even in India and all over the world, there is a rise of veganism, and there is a rise of plant-based food, all of that. There are also ample amount of researches that are happening, whether in a lifestyle medicine committee, like there are people like Dean Ornish and Dr. Bernard and Michael Greger. These people are doing a lot of clinical trials, and they're like advocating veganism or like plant-based, whole food plant-based diet. So what I want to ask is, in Ayurveda, there is a lot of significance on ghee and milk, like you said, but obviously the pure ghee, not the one that we get in the markets. What I want to ask is, for a person who's a vegan, for animals, for moral ethics, and they cannot have those benefits. So I would just want to know that perspective on such individuals.
Yeah. I can hear you. I just got up to get my water because I talked for an hour without water. So what the guru says is, if you don't want to take ghee, then don't expect the benefits that ghee will give you. And the biggest benefit that ghee gives you is ojas. So if you want to live your life without ojas, fine, don't take ghee. Ghee is a quintessential medicine. It's a need for humans. And so if you want, you can be vegan or you can be geegan. And a lot of my friends who are vegetarian say, I'm vegetarian, but I'm not vegan. I'm geegan. I eat ghee. I eat plenty of ghee. And maybe I don't eat lots of milk because it comes in Amul packets, which is, reconstituted, whatever, mixed mastitis filled milk. But I will have ghee. I will have good A2 Gir cow cultured ghee. And I have a lot of vegans in New York, and I know Dean Ornish for many years. And I do say to them, you should find out from your body as your laboratory whether or not you feel better. Most people feel better when they stop eating meat because the meat is highly processed. So for the first few months, they're like, oh, I feel so good. But after some time, they lose that snigdha, the sneha, the qualities of healthy kapha, because they don't have the dairy component. They're not eating clean foods. And the biggest problem that I'm having with vegan patients, which you might also have, is that they think plant-based food means anything that's non-veg. Oh, sorry, not non-veg. And plant-based foods is separate from vegetarianism in that it's supposed to be non-processed food. If you go and you see, I just got a packet of Ayurvedic cookies and I was looking at it. And first of all, they taste terrible. They don't taste like good cookies, but they have all this processing just to make them vegan. They use refined oils like canola, safflower, sunflower. These oils are made by food industrial processes of putting nickel in them. Nickel is poisonous for sure. They use sand to get out that color and that smell and that stickiness from those seeds that are already genetically modified, but that are also processed. So when vegans are thinking that they don't want to eat meat, they're focusing on the meat. If you want to eat plant-based foods, you need to focus on where did you get that food? Did you grow the bean? Did you go to get the rice from the farmer? Do you know whether it's processed and has insecticide and pesticide in it? If you really want to be vegan, you should be a farmer close to the food, and you should have a little bit of ghee at least, or milk. If you don't, you have a socio-political issue for being vegan. Everyone has a right to be what they want to be, but don't expect to get the benefits of ghee if you're not going to eat ghee. That's how I explain to people. And many people say, well, maybe I could have a teaspoon of ghee like once a week or something. And I say, yeah, just try it and see what happens in your body. If your body says, yeah, I like it. My bowel movements are smoother. I'm sleeping better. My attitude is better. My appetite is better. Then maybe your body is dry and rough and ghee is the only solution because your almond oil isn't kicking it. Your oat milk, your all that other stuff that is processed. I'm also concerned about the preservatives in all of these vegan foods that are not fresh, because people end up very sick, actually. They end up storing a lot of preservatives. If you live in a place like Udupi, where you can get very, very good vegetarian food every day that's tasty, right? Although they do use some milk products, they can do a lot with coconut. So coconut chutney, sambar, and idli, every day, and a khichdi with a sambar at lunch, and some fruits, a papaya or jackfruit. You can go pretty long without having much milk, but you'll still have a little bit of milk.
Okay.
What do you think? Does this make sense?
Yeah, I had a follow-up question for this, just one quick question. So let's say if there is an individual who's on exactly a whole food, plant-based diet, no processed food and all of that. And obviously for moral reasons, they cannot have ghee. So is there an alternative, like for example, coconut oil for them to get that, maybe not the exact benefit from ghee, but a little bit closer, like a coconut oil or a peanut oil? Is there something in Ayurveda that can suggest?
Depends on how they grew up and where they grew up. That's called satmya. So if they grew up in Kerala and they have, 50% of their DNA is coated in coconut, then fine, let them have some coconut. But they will never get the benefits of ghee unless they have ghee. Ghee is a unique substance. It is the closest to our human lipid bilayer. So you had some biochemistry, so you know that the human cells have cell membranes, and the lipid bilayer is very close to ghee. And ghee is an immensely important thing that I think in the next 10, 15 years, the science will come out and tell us why ghee is so important. And then it'll get suppressed because there are a lot of people that don't want that information out there. But yes, they can try to have fruits and vegetables. See, fruits and vegetables are not that healthy if you don't know how to process them. They, the plants themselves don't want to be eaten by every animal that's running by. So they put little amounts of poisons in them. That's why we don't eat most vegetables raw. We cook them, we fry them, we saute them, and we process them in these samskaras because we shouldn't be having them raw. So raw foods, people, oh my gosh, that's a question that you didn't bring up, but that's a subset of the vegan people. And the processing of foods by proper oil, proper salt, proper sugar cane juice and not sugar or jaggery, all of that is part of the entire recipe equation. So, in terms of substitutes and getting them closer, you can construct a diet and try to replenish certain things as well as you can. But yeah, the ghee, Ayurveda does not give you a substitute for ghee.
All right.
Sakshi, do you have another question?
I'm satisfied.
Then let's turn to others. Aditi, you have the difficult task of now managing the pending questions and the raised hands.
Yes, I've just unmuted Shushmita. She'll just go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. Always a pleasure to listen to you. So my question is related to my own health issues at the moment. So I was detected with the thrombocythemia 2 years back, and when I was working in India. And I was put on hydroxyurea. And from India, now I moved to Hong Kong for my work again. And here the doctor, in India, it was more like, okay, take hydroxyurea, but you also take care of your lifestyle and everything. In Hong Kong, I thought there are good doctors as well. I think he's good, my doctor, but they have increased my doses. So I was on 3. Now they made it 7, and in between it was also 10, and my body was not able to take it. So I told the doctor I am not comfortable with so many doses. So they added more another medication with that one. And at one point I felt like this is not right for me. So I stick with what my doctor in India told me. So I've also been able to convince my family now, like, let's move to Ayurveda and see how it can help me instead of just hanging on with this allopathy medication. So I wanted to know if could you suggest a place in India where I can get the consultation in Ayurveda. Another question is related with the 4 substances that you told, the poha and the modern oats. So I have difficulty with my husband. We are tussling every time, poha vs oats. So can you give me some more explanation on this modern oats?
And so just to let you know, it's not a really good idea in a forum like this to ask personal medical questions. Okay, so you've described your condition in detail, and it's not appropriate because then everyone else will do it. And this is how do I say it, right? I'm not here in a doctor's chamber, so I'm not supposed to give you medical advice. So oats are hard to digest. And in fact, people have asked me, what do you think about this being the year of the millet, India's year of the millet, or international year of the millet? And I said, it's going to be a really great year for doctors of Ayurveda to get more patients, because millets scrape and they harm the inside of the gut unless people take them with plenty of ghee. And most people are not. They're having them dry. And so what's going to happen is it's going to start scraping. And in the first few weeks, it'll be nice for it to scrape. So with millets, it's very scraping. With oats, it's a little bit scraping, depending on whether you're eating granola or raw oats or partly cooked instant oats or, Quaker oats. But if you cook them in milk, you have a better, cow milk, you have a better chance of them not being so dry and scrapey. Regardless of that, they're hard to digest. Millets are well, millets are not just one. There's like 5 or 6 types that are commonly available, but oats are hard to digest. And if you have poor gut fire, which I'm telling you, you do because of your thrombocythemia, you should not be having lots of oats. The foods you should be having are easy to eat wheat, that is the atta, the gehu, and you should hand mill it yourself or go to a peshawala and have him do it for you once a month, and then have just enough wheat for the month and then go again every month. And I don't know how easy that is in Hong Kong. It's very, very easy in Kolkata and Benares and parts of India. But the rice poha, the rice murmura or lai, these are pretty easy to get, and you can have them with milk. You can have them with water. You can also take them and saute them and make them into, you know, the poha, where you saute some vegetable, you saute some spices, throw in some vegetables, move it around, and then put in the poha and just dry fry it, and then put hot water in and cover it, and it will cook into a poha dish, and it's a rice-based grain in the morning. Should all those vegetables be in there? Only if you can digest them. If you can't digest them, then, you know, have less vegetables. That is the better option for you. If your husband's digestive fire is very strong, if both of you are farmers and you're spending a lot of time in physical labor, then yes, you can be having oats because your digestive fire is good. If you're out there as manual construction workers, if you're doing a lot of moving around, you know, when I was a medical student running around 18 hours a day, I could eat almost anything because I was moving around and exercising and lifting patients and doing a lot of work. For a recommendation for you, I will suggest that you write to Aditi. She will give you my email address. And when you write to me, I will tell you the doctor that I would recommend for your platelet disorder. And where in India do you come back to when you visit now?
I'm not from India, so I'm from Nepal. So I was working in India before for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you come back to Kathmandu or to
Kathmandu?
So I have someone in Kathmandu that I'll refer you to. That's an Ayurvedic doctor. Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Chitraji, you can ask your question.
Hello, Dr. Bhaswati. I'm Chitra from London. I just joined your talk now because it's time is not suitable for me, but I will hear your lecture later on because it'll be there. Yesterday, I asked Dr. Bijlani a question, and he suggested that I ask you. It's just that some family.
It's called turfing.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I asked Dr. Bijlani a question, and he suggested I ask you. And the question was, I heard a talk of yours sometime back, and in that you mentioned that people with Parkinson's disease, it could be a Vata dosha problem. And then if the Vata dosha was taken care of, the symptoms tend to get less. So I just wanted to ask a little bit about that because I've had people in my family with this problem, and then I wanted to suggest to them to consult an Ayurvedic doctor or something like that. So I just wanted to get your views on that.
Yeah, that's the right thing to do, is to consult a doctor that knows Vata diseases, or Vata Vyadhi as they're called. So in London, there's quite a few Ayurvedic doctors, and you can go to the, there's a Ayurvedic association in the UK. There's actually a couple of them, and they will tell you who's close to you and who you might prefer. But what you'll want to do is talk to them on the phone and say, do you work with Vata disease? You can give my name and say, Dr. Bhaswati says that I should find someone who will be able to give me Kapi Kachu. Kapi Kachu is one of the main herbs. It's called Karanj Bij, but it needs to be mixed with 2 or 3 other drugs, and those drugs are going to depend on what other factors are in that particular person you refer to. So each person is individual. So you need to check their pulse and find out a few different factors of how it started and how severe the Parkinson's is and what are all the different, we'll say, parameters. And then you can give the person the right. Make sense?
The person that I am my relative, they actually live in India. They're in Coimbatore.
Oh.
So, but before I give them, because they are kind of a little bit desperate at the moment. So I just wanted to ask whether they, is there hope for them, that kind of thing. That's what they'll want to ask me. Because they whether to suggest if I could say, try this, there is a possibility of something happening here.
Yeah, so in modern medicine, it's all about the medicine. So that's why they blind the trial. The doctor doesn't know, the patient doesn't know. And it's placebo, so maybe you get the drug, maybe you don't get the drug. In Ayurveda, there's no blinding, there's no placebo. You have to have the right doctor. If you don't have the right doctor, if you don't have someone that actually can understand you, if you don't trust that person, then you will not get cured. So I don't know if you can, if you're on a phone or if you're on the computer, but if you can see this, there's a 4-pillar model. And that 4-pillar model says that the Bhishaka, which is the Vaidya, the one that takes away the fear, cannot work alone. You need to have patient willingness. You need to have someone that's a bridge between them that either helps them take the medicine or make the medicine or get the medicine or do the lifestyle change or make the food, all the different things that need to happen. And you need to have the medicine correctly so that doctors got to know where to get it, how to dispense it, and how to deliver it. And if the doctor doesn't know, you're in trouble. So one of the best places in Coimbatore, hands down, is AVP Coimbatore. It's on Trichy Road. They do have an outpatient clinic for patients of Parkinson's. And the doctor that I would recommend there is Dr. Keshavan.
Okay.
Have you accessed that?
Yeah, I will pass the information on to them. And also, do you have, do you know any, sorry, Dr. Bhaswati?
Can you see the chat?
Yes, I can see the chat. I know the place you're referring to because I'm from Coimbatore, but I will suggest the name Dr. Keshavan to them. And the other question I had was, can you recommend any doctors who Ayurvedic practitioners who are in San Francisco? Because I have some relatives there who also have some other problems, gut problems.
Are they in San Francisco proper or in the Bay Area in general?
They are in San Francisco proper, but they can access anyone in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I have to think about who would be a really good doctor for. There is a woman named Namya. Let me just see what her name is. Namyaka or Namyata. And she used to be in India. She's quite a good doctor. And she's just moved to the Bay Area, but I honestly don't know. Hang on one second. Let me just find her. She's just arrived there and had a baby. So I know she has a practice there. Namyata Pathak is her name. She's a Vaidya. And for all of you, if you do go to any of these doctors, please mention to them that I referred you. Otherwise, they'll wonder where you came from. And I'm just going to give you her popular phone number because this is how all of the doctors find her. Let's see, 654. This is, of course, in America, so do a +1 there, okay? Dr. Namyata Pathak. She's very good, but I can't tell you exactly where she is. I don't know what town she's in. Okay?
Is she in the Bay Area?
Obviously.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bhaswati. That was really kind of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Now we can maybe just take one last question from Arun and then.
Hello, Arun.
Hello. Actually, I have like same problem like Parkinson, and doctors. I show my problem with doctor, and he medical doctor, and he taken my test in SCA 12. I don't know the full name of that disease, but that is like my hands and others are shivering at many times. So is that possible to?
It's really hard to understand you because you are somewhere that I can't understand exactly what you were saying.
Actually, this I have one problem diagnosed by the doctor, that is SCA 12.
SCA
I
12.
don't know.
Okay, got it.
I don't know the full name of the disease, but in the genome.
Yeah. So the S stands for spine, and the C stands for cerebellum, and A stands for ataxia. It's when you can't keep your balance properly and you get these tremors.
Yeah. Thank you. This is the disease in my whole family. Like my father has this problem. My sister has this problem. My brother has this problem. So can you suggest something for me?
Where are you located, Arun?
I'm located in Rajasthan, in India.
In Rajasthan, where?
In Rajasthan, in Karoli district. It's
Okay.
almost 200 kilometers from Jaipur.
And can you, you're near Jaipur. Can you travel?
Yeah, I can.
There is a Dr. Kandel in Jaipur who's extremely good with this. He's
Okay.
very
What's the name, doctor?
Yeah, I'm just getting his name for you.
Okay.
Kandel, he's in Jaipur. That's why I asked you where you are. 1 second, let me see his information. Kandel sir is, I'm gonna have you get through by his young doctor whose name is Aditi Jain. And I have
Okay.
1 second, I'm putting it into the chat. I didn't know I was gonna be doing referrals. I thought I was giving a lecture today. So 1 second, I'm just getting, you know what? There is an email address for me. And Arun, I'd like you to just write to me and then I will get you the information. When you write to me, tell me you're looking for Dr. Kandel and Dr. Aditi Jain.
Okay.
If you
So
look
can I have your mail ID or something else?
in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. If you can't get it from the chat because you can't scroll up, then please contact Dr. Aditi here, who is the course coordinator with Dr. Bijlani, and they have my information and they will get it to you. You just email to me and mention to me, I'll remember your name and I will get you the information. So SCA is not considered curable in modern medicine. However, it's only a Vata Vyadhi. And sometimes it's actually an epigenetic issue that's exacerbating it. So Ayurveda, there are some people that will be able to help you if they can take your pulse. So you might have to travel to Dr. Kandel in Jaipur just to find out. But he's an excellent doctor.
All right, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, doctor.
Yeah, thank you.
I will certainly visit to Dr. Kandel, and I request Aditi to please raise my issue to Dr. Bhaswati for further support.
Sure. What I'll do is I'll just share Dr. Bhaswati's email ID with all of you. So in case anybody has something, so they can write to her. So we can move on with closing this session with Dr. Bijlani's remark and also.
But I please urge you guys not to start
Yes.
asking me all kinds of questions and
Yes.
consultations. I do consultations online, so you can write to me, but I charge a lot of money for those because I do a lot of work and this is my profession. So that said, let's end.
I have myself got many questions, but I'll send them to you by email.
No, please ask one of your questions, please. Dr. Bijlani, I really was hoping you would ask a question. So I will wait a couple of minutes for you. Please tell me.
Okay, one question which I can ask is, you talked about clock genes and their relationship to hypothyroidism, which you find in every other woman these days. How is it that clock genes would be there in both men and women, but still women are affected much more? They get hypothyroidism
Because
much
their
more often
routines
than
more
men do.
messed up, and because in most countries women are doing the lion's share of all of the work.
So reasons
So
are more social than biological.
yeah, I absolutely think so. Because if you go to countries where they share the labor equally, there's not such a differential of the thyroid disease.
Thank you, Dr. Bhaswati Bhattacharya. Thanks are not really enough. That word doesn't convey enough our gratitude to you. Your session has been extremely popular. One of those rare sessions in which we ended with few more participants than what we had in the middle of the session. So participants kept joining, and they stayed throughout. Those who joined in the beginning stayed throughout the session. And thank you, especially because being in New York these days, we have made you stay awake late at night, and now it might be nearing midnight.
Interrupted my clock
spite of
genes,
all this.
what you've done.
Yes.
And so I've just put into the chat Dr. Nivedita, who is in Bangalore, that someone asked for, and her number. The reason I'm doing this here is so that you get to the doctor that you need faster, for those of you who are looking. And I really appreciate that you are looking to Ayurveda. But I know many of you will go to Ayurvedic doctors just like you go to allopathic doctors. You want one pill for your one disease, and if you don't get it, you leave. Ayurveda is not about one pill. Ayurveda is about you looking inside and choosing whether or not you want to take care of your body through changes in your lifestyle, changes in your attitude, changes in the way you breathe, changes in the way you choose your foods and eat those foods. And if you don't want to make those changes, there is no medicine, no herb that's really going to help you. And that's why when I take on patients, I first see whether or not they're willing to do the work. So I've had pancreatitis patients who say, well, I just want to get better because I want to drink more again. And I say the pancreatitis happened because you're drinking too much alcohol. If you don't want to stop drinking alcohol, I can't work with you. You have to work with me. You're a doctor. No, I don't have to work with you. And so Ayurveda is not easy. And as I said, not everyone deserves Ayurveda. But if you really want to heal, I will tell you here, Ayurveda can help 99% of all diseases. And I have seen it. And I have cancer patients who are living today, who were supposed to die a year and a half ago. This man just called me and said, what do you think is happening? The doctors are out of options. They can't figure out why I'm still alive. And I said, well, it's time for you to now write your book because you're not dying tomorrow. You can write your book that you've been waiting to write. He wants to write a book in Sanskrit, and he hasn't been able to do it because he was busy dying. And I can tell you that Ayurveda really does have solutions, but you have to be willing to make the change. So Dr. Bijlani, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your faith in me, in believing in what I can deliver. I really appreciate it, especially coming from an allopathic doctor.
Thank you.
A former allopathic doctor.
And I think that's been a very good and enlightening session for all of us. And all of us have so many questions. So it's good to have a moment of silence and end in gratitude. Thank you, Dr. Bhaswati, so much. Thank you, everyone. Few moments of silence.